The day I got slapped in the face for saving a stranger's life, I was soaked in river water, bleeding from my leg and still trying to catch my breath. The worst part wasn't the slap. The worst part was realizing the man I had just dragged out of the Detroit River was the same man whose company helped ruin my mother's life. Tell me something. If you knew the person you were saving helped destroy your family, would you let them drown? Or would you jump anyway? Hi, my name is Maya, and this is the story of how a homeless black girl pulled a drowning billionaire, walked into his world, and ended up forcing his billion-dollar company to face the truth it tried to bury. This is not a movie. This is my life. And if it were you, what would you have done? It started on a gray afternoon, where the sky over Detroit looked tired and heavy, like it wanted to rain, but couldn't quite commit. I was walking along the riverbank with everything I owned stuffed into one ragged backpack, a couple of shirts, a toothbrush, a notebook, and the last letter my mom ever wrote to me. My shoes had holes in them so big I could feel every rock under my feet. That river became my place whenever I needed quiet. I didn't have a bedroom or a living room or any place that was actually mine, but I had that dirty piece of riverbank and the sound of water pretending it could listen. I was just walking thinking about nothing and everything when I heard it. At first I thought it was just the wind, or maybe some kids yelling in the distance, but then I heard it again. This broken, desperate sound. Not words, more like panic trying to crawl out of someone's throat. I stopped. Listened. There it was again. Help! I looked toward the water and saw him. Far out, where the river was darker and meaner, a man was fighting the current, arms flailing, head disappearing and popping back up in that ugly, jerky way that tells you this is not someone playing around. That was real drowning. There's a difference, you know. You can feel it. I dropped my backpack. Didn't think. Didn't plan. I just ran. "Mr. Hay!" I yelled. But there was nobody else around. No joggers with fancy earbuds. No dog walkers. No families on bikes. Just me, the wind, and this man being swallowed by cold water that didn't care who he was. By the time I hit the edge of the river, my heart was pounding like it wanted out. The mud was slick and my shoes slid, but I didn't stop. I stepped into the water, and it was so cold, my body didn't even know how to react. It felt like fire for a second, like my nerves got confused. The current grabbed my legs hard, trying to yank me out from under myself. "Hold on," I yelled, even though his head had just gone under again, and he probably couldn't hear a thing. One more step, then another. The riverbed was all rocks and slime and broken branches. My foot caught on something and I stumbled, and that's when it happened. A sharp piece of wood sliced across my thigh and ripped straight through my jeans. It felt like someone had taken a hot blade and drawn a line from my knee to my hip. I gasped, almost went under myself. I could have turned back. If I'm being honest with you, there was this tiny, selfish voice in my head that said, "You don't even know him, Maya. You can barely save yourself. Walk away." But my legs kept moving. There wasn't time to be afraid. I waded deeper until my chest hit the water, and I started to swim, kicking with one good leg and one leg that screamed every time it moved. I couldn't see him clearly anymore, just flashes of a sleeve, an arm his head going under. I ducked under the surface, opened my eyes into that cold brown blur, and reached out. Nothing, just weeds. Mud rocks, panic. Then my fingers caught fabric. A sleeve. I grabbed it with everything I had, wrapped my arm under his, and pulled him toward me. His body was heavy and slack, dead weight, like trying to drag a soaked rug through cement. My lungs were burning, my teeth chattering even underwater. But somehow we moved. Inch by inch, we made it back to the shallows. When we finally hit the mud, I rolled him on his back. His lips were blue. His skin had this grayish tint that didn't belong on a living person. And his eyes. They were open, but there was nothing in them. It was like looking at a door with nobody behind it. No. No, I whispered, even as my hands were already moving. I had seen CPR on a video once in a shelter. Never practiced it. Never thought I'd actually use it. But there I was, placing my hands on this stranger's chest, pressing down, counting in my head, losing count, starting again. Then I tilted his chin up, pinched his nose, and breathed into his mouth. It tasted like river water and iron and fear. Nothing happened. I did it again and again. Come on, I begged between breaths, my lips numb, my jaw shaking. Don't you dare die on me, man. Not like this. And then, suddenly, his whole body jerked. He rolled to the side and coughed, and a stream of water came pouring out of his mouth. He gasped, fighting for air and scrabbling at the mud. I fell back on my heels, shaking so hard I could barely sit upright. My leg was throbbing hot and slick with blood, soaking into my jeans and the ground beneath me. My eyes were stinging from the cold, from the wind, from everything. Where am I? He rasped, voice raw. You're on the riverbank, I said, still panting. You fell in. You're okay. You're safe. Safe. That word felt weird coming out of my mouth. I hadn't used it about myself in a long time. He looked at me like he was trying to make sense of what he was seeing. But before either of us could say anything else, I heard them. Footsteps. Fast. Heavy. Angry. What the hell is going on here? A woman shouted. I turned and saw her charging down the embankment from a silver SUV parked up on the road. She looked like every expensive magazine had been taped together and turned into a person. Sharp heels, digging into the dirt pearls, bouncing on her neck coat, tailored just right. She dropped to her knees beside him. Tom. Oh my God, Tom, she cried, cradling his head. Then she looked at me. I've seen a lot of looks in my life. Pity, annoyance, blatant disgust. But this was something different. This was a rich woman's pure suspicion pointed like a weapon at a black girl covered in mud and river water. What did you do to him? She snapped. I saved him, I stammered. He was drowning. I pulled him out. He wasn't breathing. You saved him. She cut in this bitter laugh in her voice. Look at you. Look at your hands. You think I'm stupid? I glanced down at my hands covered in mud, scraped raw knuckles bruised. I tried to stand up, but the moment I put weight on my injured leg, it buckled, and I almost fell. I didn't hurt him, I said. Please. He was already in the water. Her hand moved faster than my eyes could follow. The slap cracked through the air so loud it startled me more than the pain. My head snapped to the side, my cheek exploding into fire. I tasted blood. She stepped toward me, eyes blazing. You little thief, she snarled. Did you push him? Did you try to rob him? Is that it? You disgusting street rat. Tell me honestly, do you think that's fair? You risk your life for someone, and their first response is to hit you and call you a thief. I didn't. I choked out, voice small. I swear I pulled him out. He wasn't breathing. She lifted her hand again like she was going to hit me a second time. And that's when the universe decided to do something wild. There was this sharp cracking sound up in the trees behind her. I looked up instinctively and saw it. A heavy dead branch, splitting from the trunk and starting to fall right toward where she was standing. It was big enough to crush her if it landed just right. Time kind of slowed in that moment. I could have watched it happen. Honestly, a part of me, the hurt, angry part, thought, "That's what you get." But my body had already made its choice. "Look out!" I yelled, and I threw myself forward, slamming into her with my shoulder. We both went down. She hit the ground with a grunt and a curse. I landed right on my injured leg and screamed. I felt the wound split open, more hot pain shooting up my side. The branch crashed into the spot where she'd been standing, splintering on impact. I rolled onto my back, clutching my thigh, trying to breathe through the pain. She stared at the branch, then at me. Her eyes were wide this time, not just angry, confused, shaken. "I told you," I hissed through my teeth. "I was trying to help." Silence. The wind rustled the leaves like it was trying to fill the gap. The man, Tom, groaned behind us, and then from the ground, in this weak, ragged voice, I heard him say, "He saved me." The woman whipped her head around. "What?" He coughed, winced, and forced the words out again. "She saved me, pulled me out, did CPR. I'd be dead without her." Her anger cracked just a little. Not gone, but shaken. The slap mark burned on my cheek. My leg was screaming. Sirens were finally starting to echo in the distance. I wish I could tell you that was the moment everything turned into a fairy tale, and people started treating me like the hero of the story. Yeah, that didn't happen. The paramedics showed up, rushed to him first, then to me when they saw the blood pouring down my leg. One of them knelt beside me gently, pulling up my ripped jeans. "Deep cut," he muttered, mostly to himself. "You're gonna need stitches." "I'm fine," I said automatically. That's a lie I've been saying since I was 9. It comes out of my mouth before I can catch it. The other medic wrapped a blanket around Tom, checked his vitals, started talking about hypothermia. They wanted to take him in the ambulance, get him warmed up, checked for water in his lungs. "I'm not going anywhere without her," he said, nodding toward me. I looked at him surprised. Most people in his position would have acted like I was invisible already. "Sir, we can send a second ambulance," the medic said. I said, "I'm not going without her." He repeated this quiet iron in his voice. So they loaded both of us up, him on a stretcher, me on another, my leg wrapped in blood-stained gauze, my body shaking so hard the blanket rattled. As the doors closed, I caught one last glimpse of the woman standing there, with her arms wrapped around herself, staring at me like she suddenly didn't know what box to put me in anymore. In the ambulance, everything was bright and too clean. The medic was checking my blood pressure, asking my name, asking if I was allergic to anything, asking if there was anyone they should call. I shook my head. "What about your parents?" he asked. "Just me," I said. "My mom died when I was 9. That shut him up for a second. Across from me, Tom was propped up on his stretcher, wrapped in shiny foil like a baked potato. His eyes were clearer now, studying me. The girl who had just dragged him out of the river and gotten slapped for it. "What's your name?" he asked. "Maya," I said. He tried it out, rolling it around like a new word. "Maya. That's a strong name." "It's just a name," I said. He shook his head slightly. "Trust me. Names matter." He let the medic fuss with his blood pressure for a while, then looked back at me. "Where do you live, Maya?" he asked. "Nowhere," I said, staring at the ceiling. "Under the bridge, mostly." He frowned. "Oh," I nodded. "That's not right." He muttered. I didn't answer. I'd heard that line before, from teachers, from social workers, from people who dropped off sandwiches under the bridge, from church people who came by once a month. That's not right. Then they'd drive away, and the bridge would still be my roof. But something about the way he said it sounded different. Less like pity, more like a promise. I didn't fully believe it yet, not even close. But I noticed it. We got to the hospital. They separated us again, wheeled me into a different room. A doctor numbed my leg and started stitching it up while a nurse cleaned the cuts on my arms and face. The pain from the needle was sharp, but honestly, compared to dragging a full-grown man out of a freezing river and getting slapped by his wife, it was nothing. They moved me to a small room with a narrow bed, thin blanket, a window looking out at a parking lot. It might not sound like much, but to someone used to sleeping under bridges and on shelter cots, that bed felt like a 5-star hotel. I lay there, staring up at the ceiling tiles, wondering how long I'd be allowed to stay before they told me to leave. Part of me wanted to disappear before that happened. The door clicked open. I expected a nurse. Instead, it was him. He walked in wearing dry clothes now, gray slacks, a navy sweater that looked like it belonged in a magazine hair. Combed back, but still a little damp. He held himself like someone who was used to being in charge, but right then he just looked tired. "You okay?" he asked, stopping near the foot of my bed. "I don't even feel it that much now," I said, gesturing at my leg. They gave me something. His eyes flicked to the stitched-up wound, then to the bruise forming on my cheek from his wife's hand. His jaw tightened. "My wife told me what happened with the branch," he said quietly. "And the slap. She thought I was hurting you," I said. I wasn't going to sugarcoat it for him. "She panicked, and she judged," he said. "I'm not excusing it." "Good," I said, because it was messed up. He nodded slowly, as if he agreed with more than he was saying out loud. Then he took a breath and sat down on the chair by the window. "Maya," he said, "I don't want this to be the end of our story." I frowned. "What does that even mean?" "It means I am not letting them patch you up and send you back to sleep under a bridge." "Like none of this ever happened," he said. "I'm not going to shake your hand, say thank you, and move on with my life, while you go back to that." "You don't even know me," I said. "You're probably just feeling guilty. Or grateful. That wears off. I know that you risked your life for a stranger, when a lot of people wouldn't have even stopped to watch," he said. "And I know you didn't ask me for anything. That's more than I can say for most of the people I deal with." He wasn't wrong there. "You keep saying story," I said. "Like we're in some kind of movie." He shook his head lightly. "No. Movies cut out all the boring parts," he said. "Real life is messier." But I meant what I said. I don't want this to be the end of whatever just started between us. He paused, watching my face like he was measuring how far he could push. "What would you think," he asked slowly, "if I said you could come stay at my place for a while, just until you heal? Get off the street. Maybe get back into school. Have a door that locks some food that isn't from a shelter line. A real bed." Hope is a weird thing. It feels heavy at first. Heavy and dangerous. I did not trust it. "You're just feeling bad because you almost died," I said. "Give it a week. You'll forget my name." He looked me dead in the eye. "I won't," he said. And if guilt was going to make me generous, it would have happened a long time ago. That line stuck with me. I stared at him. Then at my bandaged leg. Then at the window. "What would I even call you?" I asked quietly. "Because I can't go around calling you that guy who almost died all day." He smiled for the first time. A real one. "You can call me Tom," he said. "Tom." I repeated, testing it. "Okay, Tom. Stick around. I want to tell you right here, because what happened next will blow your mind. They discharged him first, but he didn't leave. He sat in that chair by the window while nurses came and went. When they finally cleared me to go, he walked with me out to the front, where a black SUV waited with a driver the same silver one I'd seen on the riverbank. "You weren't kidding," I muttered when I saw it. We got in. Me in the back seat, nervous and awkward, him sliding in beside me, like this was just another Tuesday. The driver pulled away from the hospital. "Where are we going?" I asked. "To my house," Tom said simply. "You have a house?" I asked before I could stop myself. Then winced. "Of course you have a house, what am I saying?" He chuckled. "You'll see," he said. We drove past neighborhoods I knew way too well. The soup kitchen line where I'd stood more than once, the shelter with the broken sign, the park where people pretended not to see me sleeping on a bench. Then the scenery started changing. The streets got cleaner. The houses got bigger. Lawns appeared that weren't full of trash. We turned down a tree-lined street with tall stone walls and iron gates. My heart did this weird flip. "This is it," Tom said softly as the gate opened on its own. I leaned forward watching as the car rolled past manicured hedges and a front yard big enough to be its own park. The house that came into view was made of brick and glass and money. Tall windows, wide steps, a door that looked like something out of a magazine. "That's not a house," I whispered. "That's like a castle." "It's just a house," he said. "Not from where I'm sitting," I muttered. The driver parked out front. A woman in a neat apron, Loretta, opened the door as we walked up. She looked at me with kind eyes. Not judgmental, not sizing me up, just curious. "Welcome," she said. "You must be Maya. I heard you like saving people." I didn't know what to say to that, so I just nodded. Inside, the air was warm and smelled like something baking. Cinnamon, maybe vanilla. My heart ached in a way I didn't have words for. The floors were polished dark wood. The ceilings were so high, I felt like I was inside a story someone else wrote. Paintings hung on the walls, family pictures shelves with framed memories. Nothing rattled. Nothing felt temporary. Everything said, "We belong here." I did not feel like I belonged anywhere near it. "Welcome home," Tom said quietly. That word hit hard again. Home. I hadn't had one of those in a long time, not since my mom's little apartment with the peeling wallpaper and the leaky sink. My throat tightened. "I don't know if I can do this," I whispered before I could catch myself. "Maya," he said, turning to face me. "You pulled me out of a river when you could have walked away. You didn't hesitate. You don't have to earn your place here. You just have to let yourself breathe." No one had ever said anything like that to me. Not like that. Dinner that night was nothing like the meals I was used to. The lukewarm stuff on dented trays from shelters. The days I counted crackers and pretended my stomach wasn't eating itself. Loretta brought out roasted chicken vegetables, mashed potatoes that literally tasted like clouds, bread fresh enough that steam still rose when I tore it open. I sat at one end of a long wooden table because it made me feel smaller, less in the way. Tom sat closer than the opposite end, not making it weird, just keeping me within talking distance. "You don't have to finish everything on your plate," he said when he saw me eating slowly. "It's just really good," I said. "Tastes like Sundays." He tilted his head. "What do Sundays taste like?" "Warm," I said quietly. When my mom was still alive, and we weren't running, Sundays felt like this. Like maybe the world wasn't going to fall apart for a few hours. He nodded, really listening, not just pretending. After we ate, he gave me a quick tour of the downstairs. There was a piano and one-room dust on the keys, like it hadn't been played in a while. Hallways lined with framed photographs, some in black and white, some more recent. One stopped me in my tracks. A woman with kind eyes and a wide, genuine smile, her hand resting on the shoulder of a boy around 10, mid-laugh. "That's my wife, Tom," said quietly, coming up beside me. "And my son, Owen." There was something shattered hidden under his voice when he said their names. I could feel it. "She looks real," I said. Like her smile actually meant something. "It did," he said. "She made this place feel like more than just a big empty house." He didn't say what happened to them, and I didn't ask. Some pain you recognize without needing the details. He led me into a smaller room near the back. It was cozy. Shelves full of books. A big window looking out over the backyard, 2 armchairs facing each other with a knitted blanket thrown over one. "She called this her quiet corner," he said. She used to read in here. I ran my fingers along the book spines. You read? He asked. I used to, I said, before everything got too loud. He pulled out a thin green book with a drawing of a tree on the cover and a little boy. The Giving Tree, he said. Ever seen this one? My mom read that to me once, I said, taking it from him. The cover felt like a memory. Want to read it again? He asked. We sat down in the chairs, him in one, me in the other, and I started reading out loud. My voice was rusty at first, like it was waking up from a long sleep, but it found its rhythm. Tom listened quietly, not checking his phone, not interrupting, listening, with this look on his face, like he was hearing more than just the words on the page. By the time I got to the end, my throat felt tight. I closed the book and stared out the window. Do you think trees ever get tired of giving? I asked. He thought about it. Yeah, he said. I think they do. I think they just need someone to sit in their shade for a while so they remember why they started. I didn't answer. I just leaned back and, for the first time in a very long time, let myself feel tired without feeling like I was in danger. The next morning, I woke up in that same chair blanket tucked around me, leg aching, but bearable. Rain had hit overnight. The window was streaked with drops and wet leaves clung to the glass. Across from me, Tom sat with a newspaper glasses on coffee mug in hand. He looked up and gave me a small smile. You slept through the storm, he said. I didn't hear anything, I replied. That's how you know you really slept, he said. When you can't remember the noise. We talked a little about how quiet can be nice when you're not used to it. How too much quiet can also feel scary when you grew up on chaos. My eyes drifted back to his face, and something in me said, You still didn't answer my question from yesterday, I said. What question? He asked. Who you really are, I said. Not just Tom. Not just the guy who almost drowned. You walk around like somebody who's used to hearing yes a lot. This house, that car, Loretta folding my socks like they're made of gold. People like you don't just show up under bridges, you know what I mean. He sighed and folded the newspaper, setting it aside. Does it matter? He asked. It does to everybody else, I said. And if I'm standing next to you, I need to know what storm is coming with your name. He studied me for a long second, then nodded. My name is Thomas Ward, he said. I built a tech company back in the late 90s, sold it, then built another one. Ward Tech. The name hit me like a punch. Ward Tech. The logo I'd seen on phones, tablets, billboards, bus stops. The company that made half the devices kids at school used before I dropped out. So you're like, rich, I said. He gave a tired little laugh. Yeah, he said. You could say that. Then why were you by the river dressed like some regular old man who shops at the thrift store? I asked. No security, no camera crew. Nothing, because that day I didn't want to be. Thomas Ward, billionaire founder, whatever label people stick on me, he said. I just wanted to be Tom, a man who could sit by the water without someone asking for something, and you got me instead. And I got you instead, he said. But there was something like gratitude in his voice, not irritation. If I had known who you were when I jumped in, I said slowly. I don't know if it would have made it easier or harder. I turn to you right now and ask, if you realized you were saving someone with that much power, would you be more likely to jump or less? We settled into this strange routine after that. Loretta showed me how to work the fancy stove. Tom and I made pancakes one morning, my first time flipping them without burning them. He told me I had better form than half the line cooks he'd hired over the years. We laughed when one landed crooked and looked like Michigan, but beneath all that softness, something else was brewing. One night Tom knocked on my door. Yeah, my door, because he'd given me a guest room upstairs, and told me that as long as my stuff was in there, it was mine, and asked if we could talk in his study. My stomach clenched. Studies always meant serious things in movies. He had papers spread out on his desk, a laptop open folders with Ward Tech logos stamped on them. When I walked in, he looked up, and I could tell he'd been wrestling with something heavy. "Maya," he said, "I found something you need to see." He slid a file across the desk toward me. My name wasn't on it, but my mother's was. "Camille Brooks," I read, and my heart dropped into my stomach. "I told you Ward Tech had its hands in a lot of things," he said. "One of our subsidiaries provided biometric tracking systems to juvenile detention programs. Curfew checks, school attendance, stuff like that." I felt cold, suddenly colder than the river. "Okay," I said slowly. "And what does that have to do with my mom?" 3 years ago, he said, tapping the file, "Your mother worked as a systems analyst on one of those contracts. She discovered the system was logging kids as out of bounds when they weren't. Glitches, faulty data, maybe manipulation. Whatever it was, kids were getting thrown into lockdown for hours based on bad information." I felt dizzy. The late nights, the stressed phone calls, the way she'd stare at her screen like it was a battlefield. "She reported it." He continued. "First inside the company, then outside when no one listened. She filed a whistleblower complaint. She had logs, emails, footage, and I asked already, knowing I wasn't going to like the answer, and someone buried it," he said quietly. The complaint disappeared. She was labeled a problem, a disruption. She was fired. I gripped the back of the chair in front of me so hard my knuckles hurt. "Right before the cancer," I said. He nodded gently. "Right before the cancer." It felt like the room shrank around me. The air got thicker. I saw all those nights again, her fingers flying over the keyboard. The arguments on the phone, the way she'd say, "I have to do the right thing." Maya, even when it cost her hours of sleep we couldn't afford. I remembered the day she lost her job, how they made it sound like her fault. "So you're telling me," I said, trying to keep my voice from shaking, "that the man whose name is on half the tech in this city, the man whose company helped put those systems in place, is the same man I pulled out of the river, and he didn't know what happened to my mother until now?" Tom didn't flinch. "I didn't know," he said. "I stepped back from the company years ago. I let the board run too much. That's on me. But I didn't know about her. Not until I started digging after I learned your last name." I stared at him. Anger and hurt and disbelief were all wrestling inside me. "If I'd known that before," I said slowly, "if I'd known your company touched her life like that, I don't know if I would have jumped." He swallowed. I asked myself the same thing he admitted. I turned away from him, blinking back tears. "She died thinking she failed," I said. "She died thinking no one believed her. All that evidence, and it ended up in a folder some old man could sit on in a meeting." Tom nodded, his jaw tight. "I found a backup she stored on a personal cloud," he said. "She was smart. She saved everything. Emails, timestamps, system logs. It's all real, Maya." She was right. Of course she was right, I snapped. She knew what she saw. But you know what they called her: difficult, emotional, too attached. That's what they say when a black woman tells the truth they don't want to hear. I looked straight at you right now and ask, how many stories like hers have you heard in your own life where the person paying the price is the one who spoke up, not the ones who caused the harm? Tom didn't try to talk me out of my anger. For once, a rich man shut up and let it exist. "What do you want to do?" he asked finally. "I want her name cleared," I said. "I want whoever buried her complaint to feel what it's like to have their life shaken. I want the kids who got locked in those cells to hear someone say, 'You weren't crazy, the system was.' And if that means burning down whatever Ward Tech built on their backs, then maybe it should burn." He nodded slowly. "Then we do it right," he said. "Not just for you, for her, for them." That was the twist in my story. The moment I realized I hadn't just saved a drowning man, I had pulled myself into a fight my mother had started years earlier. The river was just the beginning. The real storm was coming in glass conference rooms and quiet government offices. We went back to that fancy building downtown, the WardTech headquarters, with the mirrored glass that reflects the city back at itself. This time, I wasn't just some strange girl walking beside a rich man. This time, I knew exactly whose name was on the walls and what they'd done. People stared as we walked through the lobby. Their eyes flicked from Tom to me, whispering behind their hands. You could feel it. Is that her? I heard he brought some girl into his house. Lawyers are nervous. I kept my head up. My legs still hurt, but I refused to limp. The private elevator hummed as it rose. Tom slid that black metal keycard into the slot, the one that gave him access to every important room. You know what this used to mean to me, he said. Power, I guessed. Control, he said. Now it mostly feels like a reminder of the things I looked away from. The doors opened onto a fancy dining floor this time. White tablecloths, fresh flowers, big windows showing off the city. Board members sat around a long table, forks and knives, set down, all eyes on us. Cynthia was there, in a perfectly tailored suit, her face stiff. We walked up to the table. Tom didn't sit. Neither did I. This is Maya Brooks, he said, his voice calm, but loud enough to carry. Daughter of Camille Brooks. The name landed like a dropped glass. One man in particular, James Whitmore, gray hair, expensive watch, smug face, shifted in his chair. I remember the case, he said smoothly. Your mother was let go for violating protocol, if I recall correctly. She attempted to leak confidential data. She reported faulty biometric tracking that was putting kids into lockdown when they hadn't broken any rules. I cut in, and you buried it. His eyes snapped to mine. You have no idea how these systems work, he said. The data was inconclusive. Tom tossed a stack of printed pages onto the table. The data was clear, he said. She backed it up on a cloud outside the company. Too bad for you, she believed more in truth than in your NDAs. The room went quiet. I stepped closer. My hands weren't shaking anymore. She lost her job, I said. Got sick. Died thinking no one believed her. While you slept fine in your bed. This is an ambush, James hissed. You bring a child into a board meeting to throw accusations around. I'm not a child, I said. I'm the proof that you can't bury every story that scares you. He stood up, straightening his jacket. You think anyone is going to listen to a girl from nowhere? He said. Tom stepped between us. She's not from nowhere, he said quietly. She's from Camille. That line still gives me chills. I held up my phone so James could see the screen glowing red. You're being recorded, I said. For public record. His face paled. That's illegal without my consent, he said weakly. Not here, Tom said. And not when it involves whistleblower retaliation and criminal negligence. James looked around the table, waiting for someone to rescue him. No one moved. Tom took a breath. I moved to terminate James Whitmore from the board. Effective immediately, he said. Hand by hand, the board members raised their arms. Some looked guilty. Some looked relieved. None of them looked at me. James sputtered something about lawyers, about backlash, about stock prices. But it didn't matter. The vote was done. He grabbed his jacket, shot me a look that could have curdled milk, and stormed out. The door closed behind him with a solid click. I didn't feel victorious. I felt like I had just breathed fully for the first time in years. Outside that room, I leaned against the wall and let my hands shake then. Tom stood beside me. You did that, he said. She did that, I replied, touching the silver book charm at my throat. I just finished her sentence. Back at the house in the quiet of the study, Tom pulled out a small velvet box. Inside was the necklace I'm talking about, a simple silver chain with a tiny open book charm. They logged this from your mom's desk when they cleared her things, he said. I pulled it out of storage. I think she meant it for you. I fastened it around my neck with shaking hands. It rested right above my heartbeat. After that, I sat at his desk and wrote a letter that I never planned to send. "Dear Mama," I started, and the words poured out. I told her they'd finally listened, that the man who buried her complaint had been kicked out of the room he used to control, that the company she worked for would now have to face the harm it had done, that her evidence had survived her, that I had survived long enough to carry it. When I finished, tears had smudged some of the ink. I folded the paper gently and tucked it into a drawer. Tom watched me quietly, then opened a different drawer and pulled out a worn envelope. "I found this in the same cloud folder where she kept the evidence," he said. "Dated 2 days before she died." I opened it and saw her handwriting. My breath caught. "If anything happens to me," it said, "keep your head high. The world is full of liars, but it's also full of fighters. You're one of them. Don't forget your name. Love, Mama." I pressed the letter to my chest. That was the first time my grief felt like fire instead of stone. Something that could move me instead of just weigh me down. The legal stuff took months. Statements, investigations, government agencies moving at the speed of bureaucracy. But one morning, sitting at the little desk we'd set up for me in the attic, my new workspace, I got an email from the Department of Justice. Subject: whistleblower acknowledgement. Camille Brooks. I clicked it with my heart pounding so loud I could hear it in my ears. The email said my mother's complaint had been verified and substantiated, that the DOJ and the Department of Youth Corrections would issue a formal statement clearing her of wrongdoing and recognizing her contribution to justice reform, that the faulty biometric systems were being corrected across the facilities, that she would be honored posthumously with an award. I leaned back in my chair, closed my eyes, and let out this shaky laugh that turned into a sob. Halfway through, Loretta heard me from downstairs and came up with a tissue and a hug I didn't know I needed until it landed. A few weeks later, we stood in a small community park under a red oak tree. No big TV crews, no fancy stage, just family neighbors, a few city officials. They pulled a cloth off a bronze plaque set into the ground surrounded by flowers. In memory of Camille Brooks, mattered 72, it read, "Mother advocate truth teller. She saw injustice. She spoke anyway." There was a little engraved profile of her face, those determined eyes, and that stubborn jawline they never appreciated at work. I knelt down, placed a single white lily at the base, and whispered, "They hear you now, Mama." Loud and clear. As people started drifting away, a young girl, maybe 11 or 12, walked up to me, clutching a worn notebook and a pen. Her hair was in a puff, and her eyes were bright but nervous. "Miss Brooks?" she asked. "Yeah," I said, smiling. "I saw your speech online." She said, words tumbling over each other. "The one about your mom." And the silence. I started writing a story about a girl who exposes a fake principal at her school. I wanted to ask, how do you know when the truth matters more than what people think of you? I knelt so we were eye to eye. "You know when keeping quiet keeps you up at night," I said softly. "When the idea of saying nothing feels heavier than whatever might happen if you speak. That's when." She nodded seriously, like she was storing that sentence for later. "Can you sign my notebook?" she asked. I wrote, "Keep writing the truth. You already have the voice." Maya. That was the seed of something bigger. Back at the house, life started to look almost normal, whatever that means. Some mornings I'd be in the kitchen before anyone else leaves, rolled up hands in biscuit dough like my mom used to do on Sundays, when we still had a tiny apartment that smelled like oatmeal and chalk dust. Tom would wander in, rubbing sleep out of his eyes, making jokes about Loretta being jealous. We'd drink coffee, or hot chocolate in my case, and talk about what came next. "I want to start something," I told him one morning, sliding a tray of biscuits into the oven. A program. Workshops. For girls like me. For kids like the ones those systems hurt. Legal literacy tech, literacy storytelling. Tools so they're harder to silence. He leaned against the counter watching me with this mixture of pride and focus. "I'll fund it," he said. "Whatever you need." "You don't even know what I'm going to call it yet," I said. "I don't care," he replied. "If you're leading it, it's worth the investment." I looked at the letter from my mom, the necklace at my throat, the plaque picture saved on my phone. "Camille's Voice," I said finally. "That's the name." And just like that, my life shifted from surviving to building. We launched our first workshops in a borrowed church basement with flickering fluorescent lights and chairs that didn't match. It didn't matter. We had girls from foster homes, from group homes, from neighborhoods where calling the cops felt like adding fuel to the fire. We taught them how to document things safely, how to understand their rights, how to speak in rooms where people hoped they'd stay quiet. News of what happened with my mother started spreading. Some people called me for interviews. Some called me trouble. Some called me brave. Truth is, I was just tired of watching silence win. Then the invitation came. An email from the Detroit Justice and Reform Conference asking if I would give a talk about whistleblowing youth justice and what we were building with Camille's Voice. I could practically hear my old teacher's jaws hitting the floor from wherever they were. Standing backstage that day, wearing a navy blazer Loretta had pressed, and the same silver book charm glinting under the lights, I felt like that girl on the riverbank again, right at the edge of something deep, cold, and dangerous, knowing I had to jump anyway. They called my name. "Please welcome founder of Camille's Voice, Ms. Maya Brooks." The lights were bright. The room was packed. There were lawyers, activists, students, even a few people from Ward Tech sitting way in the back, including Cynthia watching me with this unreadable expression. I took a breath and started. "I'm not here to explain injustice to you," I said. "You already know what it looks like. You see it in courtrooms, in classrooms, in hospital bills, and eviction notices. You know what a broken system feels like from the inside." I let that sink in. "What I came to talk about," I continued, "is silence. The silence after someone tells the truth and nobody listens. The silence of deleted emails and locked doors. The silence that killed my mother faster than the cancer they wrote on her death certificate." I told them about Camille, about the biometric systems, about the kids who got locked in cells for things they didn't do, about the complaint that disappeared, about the label disruptive, about the job she lost, about the life she lost. "But the truth doesn't die," I said. "It just waits. Sometimes it waits in a forgotten file folder. Sometimes in a backup drive somebody thinks they erased. Sometimes in the heart of a daughter who's been angry and hurting for way too long." I told them about the river, about the slap, about the branch, about realizing the man I saved was the same man whose company failed my mom. I didn't make myself look perfect. I told them honestly that if I'd known, I might have hesitated. That scares me as much as anything. I asked them, just like I'm asking you, if it were you standing on that muddy riverbank knowing what you know. I saw a lot of people shift in their chairs. I told them about walking into that boardroom, about looking James in the eye and telling him exactly what he'd done, about recording him, about the vote that kicked him out of his little kingdom, about the DOJ letter, about the park plaque, about that girl with the notebook. People like to call what I did bravery, I said. But bravery is just fear that walked anyway. My mother walked first. I just followed the sound of her voice. I finished by saying, to the ones who buried stories like hers, who sat at big tables and decided who gets believed and who gets erased, I want you to hear this clearly. We're done whispering. The room stood up, like physically. People were clapping, yelling, some crying, some just staring with their hands over their mouths. I saw Tom near the back eyes, shining, clapping slowly with this look on his face like something inside him had finally unclenched. When I walked off stage, he hugged me and murmured, "You didn't just tell a story. You shifted the ground under their feet." Maybe he was right. Maybe he was just proud. Either way, it felt like another door open. So that's it. That's how a homeless girl, saving a stranger in a freezing river, turned into clearing her mother's name, toppling a powerful man from his chair, and building a platform for voices like mine that were never supposed to be heard. But it's not really. Is it? Because there are still systems out there mislabeling kids as problems. Still companies burying inconvenient truth. Still people like my mom who get called difficult when they're just honest. So let me ask you straight. Do you think my mom did the right thing risking her job to speak up? Or should she have kept quiet to keep a roof over our heads? Do you think Tom did enough, or do you still see him as part of the problem even after what he helped me do? If you were me, standing in that river, standing in that boardroom, standing at that podium, what would you have done differently? I want you to tell me. Don't just click away and forget this. Drop a comment with what part of this story hit you the hardest. Tell me if you've ever seen someone punished for telling the truth, or if you've lived it yourself. Argue with me if you think I'm wrong about something. Share this with someone who needs to be reminded that their voice isn't useless no matter how small people make them feel. And if you want more real stories like this, raw, messy, unfair, sometimes beautiful, hit like subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next one. Because as long as I've got breath in my lungs and my mother's name on my tongue, I'm not done talking. And I'm definitely not done fighting.